is on now. All right. Is there anyone here tonight that needs to take the Lord's Supper? All right. Our first song this evening will be number 794. And we need someone to lead an opening prayer and then someone to dismiss us at the proper time. Good. 794. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. My enemies triumph over me. Yea, let them that wait on me be ashamed. Yea, let them that wait on me be ashamed. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed, not my enemies triumph over me. Remember not the sins of my youth. Remember not the sins of my youth. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed, not my enemies triumph over me.
You guys just realize to be able to come here tonight and study more of your word, work with you here together. Please be with us throughout the rest of this worship service of what we conduct here today. Pray that it will be pleasing in your sight. Thank you for all that you do for us. Forgive us for all the word.
Amen. Thank you. Next song is number 453. 453.
I will sing to thee and far from the peaceful shore. There beneath the saint within, sing to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me.
The invitation song is number 939. If you'd like to mark it, it'll be on the wall there. 939. Song before the lessons, number 469. 469.
Encamped along the hills of mighty Christian soldiers rise, and rest the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing skies. Against the glowing veil below, let all our strength be heard. Faith is the victory we know, that overcomes the world. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world. His banner over us, His love, our sword, the word of God. We tread the road the saints above, with shouts of triumph on. By faith they lie, no whirlwind threat, swept on for every field. The faith by which they conquer death is still our strengthening shield. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world. To Him that overcomes the foe, wide reign that shall be given. Before the angels He shall know, His name confessed in heaven. Then onward from the hills of light, our hearts with love aflame, to vanquish all the hosts of night in Jesus' conquering name. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world.
Our Heavenly Father, we are always so thankful to get to remember the sacrifice of Jesus and died on the cross for us. Ask your blessing upon this day, on who protects us this evening, as He remembers that sacrifice for taking of His sin. Bless this unleavened bread to Christians represent Christ's body. Bless Jenny. Bless the bread we ask in Jesus' name. We continue our thanks, our Heavenly Father, for many blessings of life, for this time to remember that sacrifice that Jesus made for us. How that He gave up His very life's blood for us. Jesus takes this evening and this little vine represents Jesus' blood. Remember that sacrifice according to Scripture. Bless Him. Let's pray. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Good evening. It's good to be here. Have a good number for Sunday evening, and I know we had several that were out this morning, either from illness or visiting elsewhere or traveling, and so it's good to see all that are here tonight. Does everybody have a handout? Okay, good deal. By the way, I know Johnny Sue had asked me this morning for a lesson that she didn't have, so if you ever need a copy, let me know. And if I do it within the day, I'll remember it. Other than that, you need to send me a text or something, and I'll remember. I do better with text now, so it kind of gives me something to look at again, and I remember it much better. Appreciate the prayers and the good thoughts. Someone said I might need, because not this, I did good today, but last week I really did almost fall. And so somebody said maybe get me a chair up there, and I don't need that because pulpit's got good handles. I don't know if you noticed, I've got good places to hold on up there and here, but it's coming down. And the floor, if you've ever had this, well, my equilibrium is a little bit out of whack with my balance, and my right side doesn't like working with my left side, so the floors move. You might not realize that, but they move. And so when I get down the bottom, y'all think it's flat and level, but it's moving on me. So if I go slow, I'm okay. So maybe instead of a chair, just put a mat down there, and that way, if I need to, I'll just fall on the mat and everything be okay. I'm just fine. I did enjoy, I will say this, I enjoyed talking to Coy Evans today. And just some good thoughts on this. Coy, there's 3 levels of what they call traumatic brain injury or damage, as I think it's better labeled. One is mild, and one you do over time get a lot better. I don't know for sure which one I have, but based on the symptoms, I'm leaning towards that I have what's called moderate. So moderate, a little bit worse. But Coy, actually, when he was 50, he had an accident. He would have what would be labeled as severe. It is the worst of the worst. And, it's not that he's had a perfect health since then, but it just shows you he is one of the rare success stories for someone that had a brain injury that severe. So there is hope. It's not like it's you can't survive, but there are things that a lot of the issues I deal with equilibrium and things, that's what the occupational therapy will work on. It's just like Coy did tell me, I'm going to be seeing a lot of doctors in my future and a lot of different things, and I will probably be taking a lot more medications before this is all done. But, some of y'all deal with that. It's good to see Gene. Can't keep a good man down, can you? And by the way, Gene, my understanding, got a decent report. So that's always good. From the doctors, and so that's always good to hear. Genesis 31 tonight. Jacob flees from Laban, and I see, James, they tried to get y'all up, and Katie did, but the rest of y'all, when he got there, I said, "What? The Libby's always sit in the back row." So anyway, habits are hard to break. So anyway, so keep working at them, James. You can get them there. Okay, so Genesis 31. Go ahead and turn your Bibles if you want to. Jacob flees from Laban. Now, last week we had Genesis 30 and God remembers, and we went through a lot of things. really, chapter 30 and 31 go together. And you'll see what I mean as we get into this. And so, some people have thought, well, what did the way the speckled and the ones with spots, have anything to do with what Jacob did? And yes and no, I think, would be the answer. And we see the actual answer in chapter 31. It's what God had dictated, what God had said. And so from chapter 30, you don't see that. Chapter 31, you do. And so you just get a full picture. And so we're going to look at this, and basically we're going to read through this some. And, the nice thing about Genesis is the narrative usually speaks for itself. And these are things that it's good to know. A lot of this is the history, and so when a lot of times the New Testament writers talk about things, they talk about things from the book of Genesis or from Exodus. And so the greater understanding we have when we read things in the New Testament, we will have a greater appreciation. We must understand those in the New Testament, especially those that were Jews. When they heard these accounts, they knew very well. Sometimes we don't teach the Old Testament enough. It says, now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban, of course that's his father-in-law and uncle at the same time, but anyway, now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to your land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. Now, some people say, well, why did Jacob decide to leave? Well, there was actually multiple reasons. The greatest I would put in priority is the Lord told him to leave. And so that would be number one. But what are some underlying reasons? And we see in these first three verses that the sons of Laban, his cousins, they had thought that he took this from Laban. Bear in mind, he didn't take anything from Laban. They had an agreement that anything speckled or spotted would be his, and Laban would get the ones that were not. And so he wound up having the much better of it, as it turned out. Also, Laban just didn't regard him like before. Things had changed somewhere in their relationship, and so as a result, it was what it was. It was time to go. And the Lord said it's time to go. That was not where Jacob was supposed to be. He was supposed to be in the land of promise, and indeed, that's where he would go. In verse 4, it says, so Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. So indeed, it wasn't that Jacob stole these from Laban. It was that God chose to prosper Jacob because of the wrong that was done. Remember the promise that was given to Abraham, those that are with you that, will be blessed, and those that go against you, it won't be good for them. And indeed, that was the case for Laban. When Jacob says he changed my wages 10 times, my understanding is that is a kind of a Hebrew idiom. And basically it was just an expression that was used. So it probably didn't mean exactly 10 times, but he had changed them a great number of times. Don't know the exact number, but indeed that's what Laban did. Laban over and over changed what Jacob would be paid. And so then in verse 10, we see it was God that actually prospered Jacob. It says, in the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and molted. Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and molted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I'm the God of Bethel. Remember, that's where Jacob saw the ladder up to heaven and back. the house of God, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now rise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. So God had designed this, and it very well could be God had told him that what he must do is an act of faith, of obedience, of what he would do for this to ensure that these animals would turn out that way. Remember, Jacob would get the best of the best. If he saw the strong in the process of breeding, that's when he would do what he was told to do. And indeed, God prospered him. God saw that he was being afflicted, and God said, lift up your eyes and see what's going to happen. God reminded him who he was. And indeed, he said, it's time to go. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan, to his father Isaac. Now, we live in different times, but I know the Libbies can tell you about the way things are done in Ghana, and there is indeed a dowry and other things that are part of a marriage process. And so Leah and Rachel, and we see that apparently Rachel's even more consumed with this concept, and we'll see that just a little later in this chapter. But they were consumed with, we should get what's owed to us. But our fathers wasted it. But weren't you listening to what Jacob told you? God took all the best from Laban, and now Jacob has it. So indeed, you've got all the best that your father had. Probably more so than what we've been given through any kind of dowry. But indeed, they saw that they wanted from Laban, and is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? They had it all already. They didn't need any more from Laban, but indeed, this is going to be a source of contention. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. Now, this seems rather odd, especially being that they portray to be people that believed in the true God. There's a little bit more to this. If you read in the Nuzi tablets, you read about legal things. And these household gods, some worshiped them, some did not. But what they showed is they showed inheritance. So the one who had the household gods legally and lawfully had the right to inheritance from their father or from, whoever. And so Rachel steals the household god, not so she worships the god, but so that she would then have the inheritance. Now, it seems a really kind of a juvenile type thing to do, but indeed that was the law of that land. And so basically, by stealing the household god, she becomes the rightful heir to all that Laban would have. Kind of a foolish thing. We'll see that indeed it did mean a lot to her, but yet we see also that Rachel would die on this way as she has another child. And Jacob tricked Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him. By the way, Aramean, that region, if that word sounds familiar, that is the source of the Aramaic language as it's developed. Aramaic is very similar to Hebrew. And, of course, that became the language that was spoken during Jesus' time by many. And so it just originated from this area. It was similar to Hebrew, but it had some differences. By not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him in the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Jacob's protected is basically what God is telling Laban. You can imagine that basically someone that has 11 sons at this time and one daughter at least, and all these wives and all this flock, they wouldn't have moved all that quickly. And so you could see that Laban, even though Jacob had a great head start, it wouldn't take long for them to catch up with him. But God warns him, leave him alone. Don't do anything good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done, that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives with the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me, and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and with tambourine and lyre? And of course, I like that, lyre is a little stringed instrument, but you probably could say, well, I don't think you're quite being honest here, Laban, because part of the reason Jacob was having to leave was because the situation had changed. And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is my power to do harm to you. Was it really? But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Did Laban really have the power to do harm? Had God not told Jacob that I'll be with you? Jacob would indeed be okay. And indeed, God interjected, and indeed, Laban was not willing to go beyond what God said. And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? Here comes the big issue. The household gods are stolen. Now, bear in mind, Jacob knows nothing about this. And once again, they would have been important because this is who he would have given to be his heir of his property when he dies. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. Interesting language. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it. Jacob makes the proclamation that anyone that has a household gods, in essence, will die. Like I say, on this journey back to this land where Jacob's kinsmen were, she would at some point give birth to Benjamin, and she would die giving birth. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel was the one that had stolen them. So Laban went to Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let not my Lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. So can't raise at this point in time. And so Laban buys that. So he searched but did not find the household gods. And Rachel did indeed have it. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin? That you have hotly pursued me. For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household gods or goods? See, set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sheep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galeed. Now, we see, I don't know, you'd have to speculate, but we see that indeed Jacob confronts Laban finally with all that he had done. And Laban kind of backs up. I think Laban likely knew how God had blessed Jacob and knew that he needed to make amends so that they would be on good terms because God was definitely with Jacob. And Laban didn't want to do something that would cause him harm in the future. So they made peace, you might say, and Jacob did indeed have what he had, and indeed his wives and his children and all the flock. Now, I want you to think about this. Here we see Jacob is prospered because God had blessed him. We see also that Jacob had faith. He had faith to take the time and had faith to do what God said when God said finally to leave. Indeed, Jacob was prospered by God, and it is evident. Indeed, Jacob would return back to where he was supposed to return, where God had said. Remember, way back when he saw the ladder going up and down to heaven, that indeed that he would return one day. Indeed, it was time for that. God has His timetable for us. God has His plans for us. But we can see the faith, and we can see also the warts, how that Rachel was not always the best influence, the best one to look at. But we see how God had a hand in this. Now, we can see these people of faith, these patriarchs, and indeed they weren't perfect, they were indeed flawed, but we do see how that they had a great faith and how God blessed them. Indeed, we today, we are not perfect either, but if we exhibit faith, God will bless us. Romans 15:4 says, for whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. Jacob was sent to another land for 20 years. During this time, his father Isaac would grow older and older. He would miss that time with his family. During this time, Jacob would have to work hard. During this time, Jacob would build up his own family. And yet, Jacob would be allowed to return home. We can have hope in that. There are times that maybe we struggle, and maybe even somebody that veered away from God for some point of time, but, as long as they're breathing, they can turn back. And we've seen this over and over again. And God gives us that hope that we too can have this same type of faith. In 1 Corinthians 10, verses 9 through 13, there Paul writes, we must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. Of course, this is talking about the time when the Exodus, when Moses had to lift up the brass or the bronze serpent. It says, nor grumble as some did that were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example. They were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, He will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. These promises to these patriarchs, the exhibiting of the faith of these patriarchs, they show that God does protect His. It shows that God does fulfill His promises. It also shows those who resist God's ways that indeed they will have punishment coming one day. Now, God doesn't do it instantly like He did at one time, but make no mistake about it. If we veer away from God and remain unrepentant, God one day will judge us for that. And also make no mistake that Paul writes that let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. Sometimes we get puffed up with arrogance. We're Christians. We're the good people. Yet how do we act sometimes? Sometimes we gossip. Sometimes we lie. Sometimes we are not committed to our faith as we should be. Even the best of us can have moments where we stumble. We need to use this as a source to understand. Look at these patriarchs. They stumbled as well. We can use that as an example. We can also know that God will always give us a way to where we can resist temptation no matter how bad or how dark times are. Jacob fled from Laban, but in essence, God told him to go back home. It was really him returning to where he was supposed to be. Most of us here, I believe, are Christians, but if you're not, why not become one? Why not become a child of God? Jesus simply said, "He who believes and is baptized will be saved." Or, if you are a Christian but you've veered away, God is pleading with you to come back as well. Why not come back to safety, return where you belong? If you have any need at all, come now. Together we stand and sing.
Be with us, give us our sins.